Shin Megami Tensei brought a lot of firsts to the series. It was the first Megami Tensei self-published by Atlus, the first made for a 16-bit console, and the first released as a multi-platform title, but it's also a very important second, in the sense that it acts as a second attempt at making Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei 2, addressing all the cuts and sacrifices imposed by the hardware limitations of the original Famicom. In this video, I'll go over my experience playing it for the first time, the joys and frustrations, surprise and disappointments, what changed, what stayed the same, and as an addition to this video series, how I would rank it among the Megami Tenseis I've already played. As usual, I'm trying to replicate the developer intended experience as much as reasonable, so for this playthrough I was forbidden from using emulator features like save states and also from looking up guides and walkthroughs. Contrary to previous videos though, I didn't use Excel for mapping out the dungeons, as Shin Megami Tensei features its own in-game mapping system. This time, I was also faced with a new challenge from the start, deciding which version to play. As far as I could tell without spoiling myself by accident, the PlayStation version seemed like the definitive edition with better graphics, CD quality audio, and some quality of life improvements. Ultimately though, I was curious to see whether the Super Famicom version, as the weakest hardware of the bunch, suffered from the same slowdowns Megami Tensei 2 suffered on the Famicom, so that's the version we'll be going over in this video. Our first stop, as always, is the manual. Apologies for the extra dose of Japanese. Up to this point I've been relying on fan translations for the manuals, but I've been unable to locate one. I would say the most important part of the manual is this chart showing where each demon type stands in the eternal struggle between light and darkness, and between the Law and Chaos factions. We'll dive into more detail later on, but for now just be aware that knowing each demon's alignment is much more important than it used to be, so I took the time to copy that information into a more easily digestible format for future reference. The manual also includes for the first time a fusion chart showing the results of fusing all the different demon types together. I didn't find it to be very useful, to be honest, since each individual demon species, even within the same type, is so different to one another, but at least it reduced my time spent trying to find out how to make each different elemental spirit, which, just like last time, is the most straightforward way of upgrading demons. This time, character customization takes place as part of the prologue, a dream sequence where I have to identify myself to a talking door, then meet my two initial companions, a holy soul that was being crucified in a very Jesus-like fashion, and a downtrodden soul being bullied by a demon. These are usually referred to as the Law Hero and Chaos Hero. By naming them Aminari and High Friend and assigning their status points, they join my party and we move on. Status points work just like in the previous game, except the maximum now goes all the way up to 40, meaning we can specialize our characters just a little bit more. Status boosting instances are back and more numerous than ever, and since I had the foresight to use them only on my main character, I got close to maxing out his stats. By the way, fun fact, the game doesn't let you use the same name for multiple characters. If you try, it just tells you it's no good. I wonder if that's a design decision to prevent people from getting confused later on, or if there's a technical reason behind it. Anyway, our party of 3 young men comes across a woman bathing in the middle of a lake. She recognizes us and introduces herself as Yuriko, my eternal partner, claiming to have been waiting for me for a long time. Then, as is usual in these kinds of dreams, dear old mother interrupts us just as we are getting to the good part. Waking up in what might be the world's most sparsely decorated teenager's bedroom, we're led to check the computer for messages and find one from someone named Steven, rambling about the impending demonic threat in what boils down to him saying that the only way to stop a bad guy with a demon is with a good guy with a demon. His demon summoning program is automatically downloaded to our computer and the message disappears. Interacting with the computer again reveals a second message from Steven, teaching the basics of demonic diplomacy. Leaving the bedroom, we find Mother, who hands over our allowance of 10,000 yen and comments on hearing a bunch of sirens blaring during the night. Also, Pascal the dog is here and has the best theme song. We soon find out there's been a murder in the nearby Inokashira Park, causing the police to seal off the entire neighborhood in the hopes of trapping the murderer, because that's an entirely reasonable thing to do. Ichijoji is as peaceful as you'd expect, there's no random encounters to worry about, and you can just explore around at your leisure. There's this feeling of anxiety looming in the air though, and most of the people we find seem worried about the murder or the increased police presence. Being made for a new generation of hardware, the most striking difference you notice in Shin Megami Tensei is the vastly improved graphics and sound quality. Playing this game so soon after Megami Tensei 2 really helped remind me of what a generational leap used to mean. More importantly, the gameplay feels much snappier overall. Inside the Ichijoji shopping mall, we head to the local cafe for a cup of coffee and meet real-life Yuriko, who seemed too horny to be worried about the recent events. To be frank, talking to her makes me feel like I need an adult. They were fresh out of those though, so I settled for a replica sword that cost almost my entire allowance. Now the truth is that the Shin Megami Tensei Prologue suffers a bit from a lack of direction. You can wander around Ichijoji as long as you want, but the story only advances after you go through a few events in a very specific, yet unspecified order, starting with drinking a cup of coffee at the mall, talking to Yuriko, being attacked by a demon in one of the mall's many dark corners, then getting back home and going to sleep. We see another prophetic dream, this time featuring a girl being used as a sacrifice by a band of cultists. By calling out her name, the cultists run away in a panic and she's saved. For my playthrough, I named her Belle again because why not? Waking up, there's a new message from Steven waiting for us, adding the auto-mapping upgrade to the demon summoning program. And I have to be honest, put into context as an early 90s game and the first Megami Tensei to have a mapping feature, that must have been a massive upgrade to the formula at the time, but it suffers from some odd design decisions and limitations which, to a modern eye, make it frustrating to use. For example, it is buried inside the Omp menu, requiring 3 button presses to access it, even though there are plenty of unused buttons in the Super Famicom controller the developers could have assigned as a shortcut. By the way, there's a fun patch you can apply that does exactly that, and even though I didn't use it, I highly recommend that you do if you ever play this game. Second, the Automap is incredibly bare bones. It doesn't even show you any shops or save points. It rotates, which makes it easier to figure out where you're going, but all in all, I found myself missing all the details I put in my Excel maps, not to mention the ability to look up floor plans other than the ones I'm currently on. Heading out of our room, Mother seems concerned. Apparently she heard us calling out our neighbor Belle's name for some reason. We can visit her to ask about the dreams, but she denies knowing anything about them. By this point, I started noticing this ripping dread as the situation inside Ichijoji slowly deteriorates. In a way, it reminded me of the early days of the coronavirus pandemic, staying home most of the time, listening to conflicting reports, wandering around empty streets and finding most businesses closed down, slowly settling into a new normal. Except in this case, the dangers of walking around Ichijoji are of a different sort, with demons like pixies and zombies start appearing in small numbers. People don't seem too worried about it though, whether that means they aren't seeing them or are just in denial is anybody's guess, but this is a good opportunity to talk about the combat system. Combat in Shin Megami Tensei introduces 3 major changes to Megami Tensei 2's formula. First, different ammunition types for their guns, which contribute to their base damage and inflict different status effects. And let me tell you, especially early in the game, giving a fast character a machine gun with sleep-inducing rounds is overpowered as hell. They'll put half the enemy party to sleep before they even get a chance to attack. That strategy loses effectiveness once you start running into spellcaster enemies though, since change number 2 is that magic now has priority over normal attacks. Anyone using magic will act before anyone else, meaning enemies with instant death spells are now even more dangerous, unless you neutralize them with your own spellcasters. The biggest consequence to these changes is that, once again, you are pretty much required to take manual control over most battles to avoid being forced to retreat back to town prematurely, but that takes us to the third major change. Battle messages are now instantaneous, so you can quickly button through turns in order to save time. Except the developers implemented that feature in a very inefficient way. You have to press the A or B button once for every single message, which quickly adds up to literally hundreds of button presses per battle in the late game once you have a full party and start fighting massive enemy groups. Needless to say, my thumb started hurting only a few hours in, and I've never been more thankful for having a controller with built-in turbo. Our next step to advance the story lies in Inokashira Park, where the murder took place. There we find an old man who recognizes my unique power of having downloaded some sketchy software. He talks about how the equilibrium between light and darkness has been broken, and tests my abilities by granting me a glimpse of the future. We see an unfamiliar building. Aminari and Hyfren are present, if a little confused. The three of us automatically move up to the 5th floor where, right in front of the final door, Mother tries to interfere, warning us of the dangers lying ahead. We enter anyway and run into a strange ceremony that seemed to combine technology and religion. The scientist in charge notices our presence, turns into a demon and attacks, but the fight is interrupted by the old man bringing us back to the present and telling me that I'm not yet ready for that battle. Heading home to get some free healing, I run into a policeman who arrests me, putting me into a cell alongside our dream friend Aminari. He recognizes me right away and enlists my help to escape and find his missing girlfriend. Our chance to escape soon shows up in the form of a doctor announcing it's time for some surgery. Turns out the local hospital has been converted into a makeshift jail, and the police was bringing people in to be surgically remodeled into zombies. One of the cells contained none other than Steven, who introduces himself as a researcher working on teleportation technology and the reason why demons started flooding the human world. He developed the demon summoning program as a countermeasure in case that happened again. He finishes by giving us the devil analyzer, which, in keeping with today's theme of Megami Tensei 2 but better, can now be freely used during battle to check enemy demon stats and alignment, and points us towards the hospital director, the last obstacle between us and freedom. What a surprise, he turns out to be a demon in disguise, though maybe the actual surprise was learning that he somehow hid an entire horse under his uniform. Defeating him allows us to unlock the exit along with every single jail cell, letting everyone escape. On the way back home, you can stop by the area where you were arrested to find a middle-aged man who comments that the murderer had been arrested on that very spot. A nice touch that reveals the police had been making good use of that murder investigation pretext to just do whatever the hell they wanted. We had agreed to help find Aminai's girlfriend, who just happened to be our neighbor Belle, but she wasn't home either. We wander aimlessly some more until we find, tucked into another obscure corner of the Ichijoji Mall, a gang led by some guy named Ozawa harassing another young man. They leave once Aminari makes it clear that he's going to interfere if they don't. The young man isn't so much grateful at being helped out than loathing the fact that he needed help in the first place. When Aminari mentions our name, however, he recognizes it from his dreams and introduces himself as our second dream friend, Hyfren. There's already some tension in how Aminari reacts to that news, and the single-minded way Hyfren keeps repeating that he needs more power. He kind of forces himself into our party and we move on. Also, as an interesting little detail, the guy somehow starts off with a goddamn MP5. Some random teenager managing to get himself a submachine gun in the middle of modern Japan was a bigger surprise than finding out about Steven's teleportation experiment. But turns out it's not that hard to get a hold of a bunch of MP5s, as long as you can afford to pay the antiquarian 25,000 yen each. And speaking of equipment, another of my Megami Tensei 2's complaints was solved in Shin Megami Tensei. The equipment interface now gives you instant feedback regarding stat changes caused by swapping a character's equipment, making it so much more convenient to use. Wandering around some more, it's plain to see the people of Ichijoji are getting increasingly worried, and the schoolgirl mentions that Ozawa's gang is searching for Belle. Suspicious. The policemen in the blockades have been replaced by soldiers as another sign of their rapidly deteriorating conditions, but the real shock is waiting for us back home. The background music takes a dark, ominous turn as Mother starts acting strangely. High Frame remarks that he's noticing a strange smell in the room, and the demon Amano Sakugami reveals himself, having eaten Mother from the inside out and wearing her as a skin suit. Defeating him grants us an ID art for the Echo building. The game doesn't dwell too much on Mother's death, but there's this neat little piece of dialogue where Aminari seems at a loss how to act, clearly wanting to do something to help, but knowing there's nothing he can do about it. Even High Friend, in his own way, seems to empathize a bit. There's a single silver lining to the whole situation though. You see, Pascal the dog is still here. He joins our party as a mascot, unable to fight, but as I found out while doing research for this video, you can immediately fuse him with any demon to get a level 43 Cerberus. I noticed that as I was using other demons actually, but didn't even try it due to knowing that you're not allowed to have demons of a higher level than the main character. As it turns out, Pascal is the only exception to that rule. Fusions are largely unchanged from Megami Tensei 2 by the way, other than the fact that there seem to be a lot of other special aces you can run into, and I'll highlight some of them as we proceed. By the time we started exploring the Echo building, the game finally felt like it was hitting its stride. Here's a straightforward dungeon, it seemed to say. Have fun! It wasn't too difficult even without the benefit of a Cerberus backing us up, as Shin Megami Tensei gives players a lot more freedom to recruit pretty much any demon they meet, and since having a demon in your party essentially gives you a free pass to never have to fight their species again, I soon learned that the best strategy to clear a dungeon is to identify the most dangerous species in the area, recruit one of them, and have them act as our liaison with the locals. They'll even occasionally give you a bunch of items, money, and magnetite. There are still some rules to keep in mind regarding monster alignment, but I'll cover this later. For now, I just want to note that the overall recruiting process is pretty much the same as Megami Tensei 2, except it feels like there's more variety and consistency in how each demon species react to the different approaches and the correct answers to their questions. For example, when a demon asks you to approach, some may admire your courage and agree to negotiate with you, others may become scared or use it as an opportunity to take you by surprise, and so on. Learning how the local demons behave is a natural process that happens as you explore each area and reminds me of how I felt playing the first Megami Tensei, as part of an intricate and detailed ecosystem rather than just another main character going through the dungeon to fight the boss at the end and never look back. It's not hard to figure out the Echo building is actually the place shown by the old man in the vision he imparted to us not too long ago, except instead of Mother, we find Yuriko waiting in front of the boss room. She's a lot more enthusiastic though, saying that we'll be fine. We interrupt the scientist's ritual like before, and he transforms into a demon that we beat easily enough. Entering the room, the others are gone, leaving only the mysterious computer behind. Pascal approaches it and disappears. I expect the developers didn't want players to have a level 43 Cerberus for too long, as that would likely trivialize a lot of the early game challenge. These terminals are, for all intents and purposes, a less whimsical version of Megami Tensei 2's checkman. They act as both safe and fast travel points that unlock as you find them scattered around the map. This particular terminal is an exception though, as it allows us to teleport to a certain research lab despite never having been there before. There's this funny scene where an orc assumes we're demons freshly arrived from the underworld and welcomes us, praising how good we are at disguising ourselves as humans. He soon finds out though, and we are forced to fight our way out of the facility, running into Steven once again, who upgrades our computer's memory free of charge. More importantly, teleporting to the research facility allows us to bypass one of the soldier blockades, opening up a whole new region of Tokyo to explore, which includes the Shinjuku Alta shopping complex, sadly closed down in 2025. In its iconic massive billboard, we get to see Gotou for the first time. He gives a very passionate speech denouncing modern civilization in all of its discrimination, poverty, and disregard for Mother Earth's resources, claiming there's a conspiracy to wipe out all of Japan, and explaining his plans to fight the Omi battle by summoning an army of demons, or ancient gods as he calls them. In doing so, he hopes to usher in a new utopia where humans and demons, ancient gods, coexist. By the way, the Shinjuku area marks what I'm pretty sure is Jack Frost's first appearance in his modern form, He-Ho and everything. The Shinjuku Mall introduces us to Shin Megami Tensei's biggest addition to the formula, the 3 factions along with the alignment system. Megami Tensei 2 already had a preliminary version of these concepts and 2 different endings that hung on a handful of choices spread along the game, but Shin Megami Tensei expanded upon them and integrated them more tightly to the main story in the form of the Messiah Church, Dojo of Healing, and Gaia Shrine, all of them offering healing services and a bunch of powerful alignment restricted items for a modest fee, while also working as a way to represent each faction's territorial reach and influence over Tokyo. The game tracks certain actions like which demons you fight against and which you talk to, which demons you've summoned to your party or fused, and a bunch of choices made throughout the story. As your alignment shifts towards lower areas, the opposite faction will become completely hostile to you. Their healers won't serve you, their demons won't join your party, and their traps will hurt you. Plus, your alignment affects the outcome of several story events, all the way up to the ending, of which there are 3. Truth be told, many other early RPGs experimented with that idea, so that in itself wasn't innovative, but very few made your character's alignment such an integral part of the gameplay loop and story. In principle, I really like that. While modern game design has largely moved away from moralistic, prescriptive systems in favor of faction or character-based reputation, a system that judges your every action from a morally absolute point of view is very fitting for a game so deeply entrenched in religious themes. Big Brother may not be watching you, but St. Peter is. I have a major complaint though about the fact that it's such an opaque system. There's barely any explanation or feedback on how it works, either in the manual or in-game. Most of what I know now, I only learned after beating the game while doing research for this video. In fact, it seems fairly common for people to end up locking themselves into the Eos path by being unaware of the fact that you can resolve confrontations peacefully, because, almost every other JRPG trains you to just murder everyone. I'm guessing that was a conscious choice made by the developers to prevent players from metagaming their way into their preferred ending, but they don't even tell you about the one UI feature that's supposed to give you feedback on your alignment. The little map marker that spins clockwise if you're lawful or anti-clockwise if you're chaotic. Shinjuku feels like a pretty standard Megami Tensei town, where you find a few shops, a bunch of NPCs to fill you in on recent events, and so on. In a local bar, we hear rumors of the Americans planning to bomb the city to stop Gotou's rebellion, and of a resistance movement forming to put a stop to both armies. The most intriguing part being that the resistance leader also happens to be named Bell. The punk Ozawa seems to have joined with Gotou, who ordered him to capture her but doesn't even know what she looks like, so he is reduced to capturing every single person who shared her name instead. It was around that time when I wandered somewhere I shouldn't and put my party in a fight that we wouldn't win. We died, and instead of finding Aaron ready to revive us for the low price of exactly half my money, like in the other games, I was sent back to the start menu. That's right, another major change introduced in Shin Megami Tensei is the fact that dying leads to a game over, no ifs or buts. You better save often or you might lose an entire hour of progress due to a single stupid mistake. The irony here being that there was a save point in Shinjuku, I just hadn't found it yet. And so I was sent back to the moment after we arrived in the research facility, losing a bunch of experience, demons, and even map progress. Faced with this unpleasant surprise, I decided to go to sleep earlier that night. Finishing our Shinjuku exploration, we find our favorite stalker Yuriko in a quiet little bar hidden outside the main corridors. The barman there recognizes my character's handheld computer and asks a few questions. Answering them correctly awards us a matchbook that acts as the entrance ticket to our next destination, the Resistance's base. By the way, if you get an answer wrong, the barman throws you out, but in an uncharacteristically forgiving turn of events, there's nothing stopping you from just turning around and trying again. Turns out Belle, the resistance leader, is a different person from Belle the neighbor. Our meeting starts off well enough, she recaps all the information I had already learned by talking to all the other NPCs for the benefit of players who didn't, and gets our party to agree to join her fight against both Gotou and the American leader trying to retake the city, Ambassador Thorman. Then, Yuriko teleports in and takes Belle away to who knows where. Turns out she had been secretly using us to track down the Resistance's hideout. The remaining Resistance members rush out to try and find her, promising to meet us back at the bar in case they find something. So finding Belle turns out to be rather straightforward. All you have to do is head to the bar to learn she was slated to be executed in front of the Tokyo Metropolitan Government building, then head there to save her. If I knew where that was at least. The overworld map features a bunch of unique buildings that look like landmarks, but it's not like I'm familiar with any of them. So I decided to take a quick look on Google Maps, found out it's located a few blocks southwest of the mall, and hey, that worked. There we find Belle about to be burned alive for defying Gotou and Yuriko running the show. She calls us onto the stage to scold me for choosing Belle instead of her, though that wasn't really a choice from a game mechanics point of view, and sent her minions to kill us. First the zombie ops, then the zombie soldiers, and at last, for the first time in a Megami Tensei game, a battle against two types of enemies simultaneously. Don't get your hopes up though, these are few and far between, and the combat mechanics really weren't adapted to deal with the ramifications of that design decision. Yuriko eventually gives up and leaves, while Belle returns to the bar where she thanks us for saving her life and, as a reward, gives us some valuable information. To Aminari, what happened to his girlfriend so he could save her. To Haifren, Ozawa Stug's hideout so he could get his revenge. Both of them leave our party, eager to complete their own objectives, and Belle joins in their place so we can take the fight to both Gotou and Thorman. This is another greatly improved aspect of Shin Megami Tensei over the previous games. Characters have a lot more agency and they'll just go off to do their own thing whenever they have reason to believe doing so will help achieve their own personal goals. Their reasons too are a lot more sensible and relatable when compared to, for example, the Dark Hero's overwhelming nonsensical edginess. Of course it's always scripted, but it made for a much more interesting story. The one detail that feels off is how the Shinjuku corridors are rolling with hostile demons, but everyone seems safe. In the previous games, towns were safe places that, for one reason or another, demons stayed away from, so that made sense, but in Shin Megami Tensei, it's not uncommon for you to talk to an NPC, walk a couple of steps, then get attacked by a demon, so it feels like the game is giving me mixed messages, telling me Shinjuku is both safe enough that I can stand around calmly talking to random strangers, and so flooded with hostile demons that I can barely walk 5 steps without getting attacked. I happened to find Gotou's base first, but as I understand it, the game allows you to visit them in either order. Fighting our way into his basement, which also marks our first skirmishes against members of the Gaia cult, we find and release all the bells Ozawa had imprisoned in his search for the leader of the resistance. One of them mentions Aminari had tried to rescue them but wouldn't because of all the guards. If only he had the patience to wait until Belle was done talking instead of rushing ahead on his own. We eventually reach Gotou's room, a very traditional looking dojo with tatami floors, a massive hanging scroll that is only partway visible but, going by the PlayStation version, is supposed to say Amaterasu o Mikami, the full name of the goddess Amaterasu. He tells us of God's plans to create the 1000-year kingdom, saving a few chosen souls while the others perish in nuclear fire, just like in Megami Tensei 2. He then tries to enlist our help to stop that. Well, I didn't want the world to be set on fire, so onwards we went to Mr. Thorman's embassy to hear what he had to say. Before getting to him though, I have to say that demons guarding his dungeon are much more friendly looking, even though they were trying to murder me just as hard. I mean, look at that fine spaniel, not to mention the literal angels able of killing my demons in a single hit. Thorman's office looks a lot classier than Gotou's dojo, with lots of wood paneling, fancy furniture, and a massive world map that eerily seems to be putting America smack dab at the center. The ambassador gives us a warm welcome, almost as if his minions didn't try to murder us a dozen times over on our way here. He is very diplomatic in his approach, telling us about the American army's efforts to suppress the demonic invasion, Gotou's plans to summon Lucifer himself, and carefully avoiding any mention of nuclear weapons. Well, I didn't want Lucifer to set the world on fire either, so this marks the first big decision point in the game. As you've probably figured out, Gotou represents the Eos faction's belief of operating with demons to build their idea of a better society, though with a somewhat short-sighted approach of burning it all down first. Thorman represents the Law faction's devotion to saving a very narrow group of people they deem worthy of being saved while not giving a damn about sacrificing everyone else, and Bell's resistance rejects both, representing people who just wanna mind their own business in peace but, ironically, find themselves under attack by both sides instead. Anyway, the choice of who you support here has a significant effect on your alignment, though, as I soon found out, doesn't really change the story. I decided to deal with Gotou first because at least Thorman's carefully worded speech held some vague promise of restoring peace to the world. Gotou is immediately aware of our intentions and summons demons to help him. By that point, I was catching on to how powerful magic can be in Shin Megami Tensei, and using Bell's lightning magic managed to stun-lock the poor guy to death. Seriously, Gotou only managed to get a single attack off in the whole fight. Bearing a couple of late game bosses, that strategy pretty much trivialized any boss fights in the game and many random encounters as well, after Bell's MP grew to a point where you'd use her offensive spells without the risk of running out too quickly. We then go back to Thorman, fighting past his minions who insist on attacking us despite being on the same side, and he shows us his true form. It's Thor! Man. Also, let me just take this moment to observe how often male demons seem to be depicted in positions that hide their crotches. I'm 95% sure this is a compromise solution to depict them as naked without showing a bunch of dongs on the screen, but it kinda makes them seem like they ate something bad and are struggling not to crap their pants. Thor congratulates us in the name of God himself and asks if we want to continue working for him. I decided to say yes just to keep the door open, but Thor takes that as consent to jam his missile through it without any warning. Turns out he did intend to bomb Tokyo all along to contain the demonic truth before it would spread. It makes for an interesting paradox if you assume both leaders are being honest. Gotou was first driven to ally himself with demons because he believed God's servants wanted to destroy Japan, but Thor justifies his actions by claiming it's too late to save Tokyo from the demons. It felt like someone else had a hand in starting that nuclear meltdown. Either way, Thor waves goodbye as a 30-second timer starts up. Guess our part in God's plan is to just die along with everybody else. As you might expect, you can't really outrun an ICBM, but I damn well tried and found out the developers actually gave the soldier guarding the embassy's entrance a new line of dialogue where he asks why we were in such a hurry. I love that kind of attention to detail. When the missile impacts, Bell asks the teleport spell but claims there's not enough time to save us both, so she decides to save just me instead. You know, 30 seconds isn't much, but it sure wouldn't have hurt to start teleporting sooner. That leads us to the Buddhist spiritual realm of Kongoushinkai, the Diamond God realm. It is, as you can see, very blue. We are welcomed by an ancient mystic named Enno who tells us our two dream friends have also been transported to this place and asks me to go fetch them, presumably so he didn't have to repeat his explanation 3 times. He at least introduces me to his demonic familiars Gotou and Thorman, who are in charge of healing and saving our progress, the one safety net we have available in one of the most difficult sections of the entire game. Not only are the demons stronger, but you spend a decent bit of that initial exploration phase alone with no friends or demons to back you up. This is especially tricky in terms of permanent status effects like paralysis. While they don't immediately result in a game over, having your entire party disabled prevents you from running away, leaving you to just watch helplessly as your enemies keep attacking. And since your party at the time consisted of only, well, me, I guess you can see the problem. Still, it wasn't too long until I found Aminari, who has access to healing spells. Also, I ran into one of my favorite monster designs from Shin Megami Tensei, the Neomata. She would look attractive if it wasn't for that pale white skin and empty eyes, making for a really creepy look in the same vein as the Silent Hill nurses instead. And I don't know if that was a deliberate nod, but her battle animation has her winking just like she used to in the first Megami Tensei. By bringing both companions to Ozuno, he starts explaining that we're currently in the demon world. The human world as we know it has been destroyed, but despite all that, there are still fragments of human civilization trying to survive in an environment that is actually harsher than the demon world itself. He's reluctant to let us go back unprepared, so he first asks for a favor. We had to find a mystical spring located in the outer reaches of the Kongoushinkai and bring him some of its water. This section is the closest that the game gets to teaching us something about the alignment system. Scattered throughout the map, there are rooms where different spirits talk to us, and Ozuno's image occasionally appears to give cryptic hints about how different actions affect our alignment. Long story short, we find the spring, which looks exactly like the one Yuriko was taking a bath in the first drink sequence, get some water and make our way back to Ozuno. He drinks it, then asks for more because that's an easy way of padding out your game. We grab some more and get back to him, but turns out this time the water was for us to keep. Our next step was to meet two spirits living on opposite ends of the Kongoushinkai and retrieve a pair of powerful weapons. Without my companions, probably because it would cause a few problems. These spirits are each aligned to one faction, and while they are friendly and helpful to those who share their views, they become violent when meeting someone who doesn't. Getting back to Ozuno, he gives us a neutral-only sword and sends us off to a final test, defeating Zen and Gotou. When we do, he finally relents, leaving us with one last warning to not be surprised at the state we would find our world in. And so, after about 15 hours of gameplay, we finally get to the post-apocalyptic wasteland that Megami Tensei 2 starts right in the middle of. Though, I have to say, all of the setup showing a bit of daily life, watching the slow march towards Armageddon, being a part of it, and especially seeing the changes to the overworld made for a more interesting introduction than just plopping us right in the middle of a nuclear wasteland. I still think some of the early gameplay was too reliant on forcing players to explore thoroughly purely because the game doesn't really point you towards the next story events, but at least the act of exploring wasn't boring. Anyway, we run into a beggar and get asked that because, apparently, the yen is worthless now. Everyone uses maka, so our pieces of paper may as well be confetti. Walking around the overworld, it doesn't take long until the developers smack us right in the face with a plot thread. A female voice echoes in my head, calling out for help, giving me a bunch of psychic damage as a result. This will happen regularly until we help her, but her pleas were awfully devoid of any details we could use to actually find her. This is the point where the game really opens up, if you're willing to put up with that girl's regular screaming and the mental damage that follows. You are somewhat limited by monsters getting stronger in areas meant to be explored later, but there's a lot to explore nonetheless. The one saving grace is that we seem to lose psychic reception inside buildings, so at least her voice stopped slowly killing me once we entered Shinjuku. Shinjuku's gone through a slight remodel since we last visited it, and among the new facilities we have the newly opened rag shop, run by an old acquaintance of ours. This time there are not one, not three, but rather a whole 12 different jewels available to trade with him for rare items, but the greatest upgrade to his inventory comes in the form of elementals. You can acquire any elemental by giving Rag certain preset combinations of jewels, making the process of upgrading your demons a lot more convenient, as long as you know which elementals you need. It really is a very convenient system when used in moderation. Ozawa's really climbed up the social ladder since we last saw him. quickly rallying some of Gotou's followers to help him take over Shinjuku and entering a pact with a powerful demon to stop other demons from attacking the settlement. And I have to say, he really did succeed. There were no random encounters inside Shinjuku, only a few preset ones like a few Gaia ultis guarding the entrance to the teleportation terminal or a Wendigo guarding a cell holding the Psycho Diver. The Psycho Diver aims to be left there by Ozawa to brainwash anyone who disobeys him. Gee, I thought the whole point of the Eos faction was to rebel against God's tyranny, but I guess it figures that was just a step towards establishing their own, complete with a private militia and everything. At one of the bars, you can sell your old money to an old man who loves collecting old banknotes. The exchange rate is terrible, but hey, better than nothing. You can also find other important bits of information, like how the Messiah Church of Shibuya is being led by someone the Elder Savior, but our real objective here was to find Ozawa because A. High Friend still had his urge to settle with him, and B. Brainwashing is not cool. In true main character fashion, we give no attention to the possible negative consequences of removing the linchpin keeping a fragile semblance of peace in Shinjuku and instead charge into his well-protected office for some old-fashioned justice. And then get absolutely annihilated by a group of flying leopards. You know how in Megami Tensei 2, the only way to learn that an enemy can reflect melee damage is to try to hit them with a melee attack? Yeah. After learning a valuable lesson, we reach Ozawa in our second try, only to find out he's now an old man and doesn't seem to recognize us. He summons his demon master, Takeminakata, who's so powerful our enrageds decide to retreat in a panic. This causes High Friend to decide on taking drastic measures, and he insists on fusing himself with a demon. The next time you enter a heretic's manor, you just pick one from your computer and fuse himself with it. Too bad the game doesn't have custom sprites for every combination. It would have been funny to have him turn into a green lady instead of a mall ninja. Anyway, I can't help but think this was probably the most daring writing and game design decision in the whole game. Taking control away from your players is always risky and, in this case, results not only in deleting a potentially valuable demon, but also in spending a bunch of the Eos hero's attribute points without the player's input. It fits nicely with what I've said about NPC agency, and it all makes perfect sense within the story, but I just know most developers, especially nowadays, would never allow this kind of design to make it into their game for fear of frustrating their players. Like I said in the Megami Tensei 2 video, this is the reason I love playing retro games, not due to nostalgia, but so I can distance myself from the pared down, focus tested to hell and back design decisions that infest most modern AAA games, and find new experiences in old ideas that just aren't made anymore. That sequence right there, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. I've never had that happen in a game before, and I just can't wait to see what else these old Megami Tensei games have in store for me. Anyway, since I didn't know that was going to happen, I actually spent a significant amount of time exploring the rest of the map before visiting another heretic's manor. I discovered the Altavision billboard had survived the nuclear blast and was now playing a Mexican broadcast that revealed to us it had been 30 years since the bombs fell. That explains the lack of deadly doses of radiation on the surface, and Ozawa, I guess. I also explored all of Shibuya, which was full of missions as expected. Running into them as a law-aligned character felt a bit odd though. If you bother talking to them, they'll often recognize you as one of their allies and join you or give you gifts, but that's only if you start the dialogue, otherwise they'll just try to hear you. It would have felt a lot better if these faction members recognized your allegiance from the start. That would make them look a bit smarter, more rational. In the top floor of the Shibuya dungeon, I received some good news and some bad news. I found a girl who was calling for help and slowly killing me in the process. Yay! But her mind was possessed by a demon and I had no way of saving her, so it would be a while before I was free from her constant psychic damage. Anyway, since High Friend had evolved into a ninja, it was time to pay Ozawa another visit. This time I was allowed to actually fight Takemi Nagata, stunlocked the poor demon like the dishonorable bastard that I am, and had a choice to either heal Ozawa or let him go. Remember what I said about removing the linchpin keeping a fragile semblance of peace in Shinjuku? Well, that sounded like a terrible idea. Which is exactly why High Friend did it instead of me. Then he goes off on us for being too soft-hearted and leaves the party. As expected, the demons were now free to just roam Shinjuku to their heart's content, attacking us plenty of times on the way back to the Psycho Diver's cell. At least he was now free to leave and, in gratitude, agreed to take a look at the bound girl in Shibuya. He brings us inside her mind but senses a dangerous presence further on, so he decides to wait for us in relative safety. If you remember the earlier dream sequences, you recognize the style set. That dungeon turned out to be another of these situations where the demons themselves aren't that challenging, but the trek back and forth from the nearest healer, going through the entire Shibuya dungeon, caused the section to be a lot longer than it should have. Couple that with a massive, labyrinthine map, and the whole thing just dragged on for days. At this point, it was clear to me that the Megami Tensei games were always at their weakest when they forced me to keep trudging through the exact same path many times over for the sake of being healed. The developers were pretty good in preventing that from happening, but Shibuya really needed an elevator. Now guess what? Belle died to the bomb but was later reborn and raised by members of the Messiah Church, who believed she was the new Messiah who was supposed to lead everyone to salvation. She remembers me and decides to stop leading the people of Shibuya to follow me instead. Also, let me just mention this is probably the closest Shin Megami Tensei gets to having a goddess resurrect. Much like the Final Fantasy series, the further we move in the timeline, the less the title seems to be connected to the actual contents of the game. Our next destination was Roppongi, but stopping in Shinjuku to give Belle her own gun, I discovered High Friend was still in the middle of his cleanup, having killed the commander of Ozawa's militia and leaving a note behind for us to find. Roppongi is protected by a magical barrier, and the only way inside is through a tunnel hidden beneath a nearby ruin. Despite the dark rumors that surround it, the city is peaceful to a fault, with no random encounters to speak of, and a lot of people talking about the local leaders, Count Red and Baron Black. One of the NPCs just straight up calls them a pair of logicons though, which, considering the horror setting, set off a bunch of alarm bells in my head. Roppongi is also home to Alice, a little girl under the old man's care. She is very enthusiastic about having us go meet Uncle Red as she calls him, but first I had a town to explore. There are some interesting details to note in Roppongi. First, it has no healing facilities whatsoever. They are so independent they don't even accept the neutral faction. Second, the town has a full complement of shops, but they're all abandoned. And third, Belle is here. I mean neighbor Belle, not Dream Belle, though she's also here being a companion and all. Anyway, turns out neighbor Belle really was Aminai's girlfriend all along. She was turned into a body onion but somehow retained her sanity and was left imprisoned in Roppongi for that reason. She asks for the Hangon-O so she can finally be saved. Well, thankfully one of the perks of being friendly with the Messians is that the Messiah Church sells them for 4,000 maka each. Gone are the days of trudging through teleport mazes for a single Hangon-O. Now I just leave the church with as many as I wanted. So we teleport to Shinjuku and back, and we hand one over to Aminari's girlfriend. And so we save her, by giving her the means to heal herself. Look, she literally asked for it. Also, I discovered this counts as a lawful action, so for what's worth, God seems to agree with me. The Roppongi basement isn't quite as safe as the surface. It's still free from demons, but someone filled it with poison traps, likely to protect the lancing pot, an important tool that will help us later. Nearby, we find Baron Black. Ah, I see that they went with the Red Ribbon naming scheme. Anyway, he seems incredibly devoted to Alice, talking about how both him and Aunt Red restored Roppongi just for Alice's sake. The way he says it has this subtle undercurrent that doesn't go where you might be expecting but feels a bit unsettling nonetheless. The same happens when we meet Aunt Red on the third floor. He states in no uncertain terms that everything they do is to keep Alice happy and safe. She clearly outranks everyone else in town, and now she wanted a Heroine. What the heck is a Heroine? Well, the only hint you get is that this is something you're supposed to buy. So then I went scouring the Tokyo Wasteland shops to buy this Heroine for a little girl we just met. Or at least that's what I thought. Turns out it wasn't that difficult to find at all. Alice's joy lasts about 5 seconds until she forgets about it and asks for something else. She wanted us to die. I had just saved, so I decided to find out what happens when you say yes. She becomes overjoyed at the promise, but unfortunately, Atlus still hadn't gotten around to implementing a game mechanic where you put a gun to your head, so we just stand there as she slowly realizes that we aren't actually going to do it. Count Red comes rushing in and reveals his true form, the demon Belial. Except that activates my pot of greed, glancing pot, sealing the demon before the fight even starts, and once again proving how important it is to explore everywhere you can before moving on with the plot. Alice disappears along with Belial, then Yuriko shows up and takes the pot and does Belial away with her. Impeccable timing as always, almost like she spends all day watching us or something. On our way out, we run into Baron Black, who's understandably not amused by our recent actions and tries to snatch all of us. Aminari pulls his best Mr. President impression and protects everyone with his body. Baron Black decides not to try again for some reason and runs away to extract Aminari's soul. With Count Red sealed away and Alice gone, the Black Baron lost his reason to maintain Roppongi's barrier, so the place becomes flooded with demons just like Shinjuku. You know, if there's a lesson to be learned here, is that if a guy named Ench shows up in your peaceful post-apocalyptic settlement, you should probably run away before the demons come flooding in. Chasing after Baron Black is a straightforward affair since we already knew where to find him. He goes through the usual villain routine, but the developers decided to use Pascal's theme song as background music for some reason, so the whole thing just felt a little bit silly. He reveals his true form, the Lich Nebulous, who happened to be a real wake-up call. He was a faster spellcaster than Belle and instantly healed Ench before she would start stun-locking him to death. She clearly needed a few extra points in speed. In his last moments, Cerberus gives us a few more pieces of the Roppongi puzzle. They had built that settlement to act as Alice's playground, attracting people from all over the wasteland with the promise of a safe haven, only to strip them of their souls and use them to power their magic. The barrier, the citizens, even Alice herself depended on that energy to exist. Defeating him doesn't restore Aminari though, it only allows his soul to journey freely into the afterlife. A messenger from God arrives and takes him away, declaring Aminari worthy of joining him in heaven. As far as companion deaths go, this is such a great moment when compared to the Dark Hero's death in Megami Tensei 2. Both of them sacrificed themselves to face a boss demon alone, but Aminari's death came as a result of him reacting out of selfless instinct to a clear and impending danger, while the Dark Hero spent however long waiting for us to arrive just so he could jump alone into a battle he had no reason to fight by himself. The developers even gave us a proper explanation as to why we wouldn't just resurrect Aminari like usual by having his soul ascend to heaven to serve a higher purpose. And that's without even getting into the contrast between Cerberus and Belial's endless devotion for Alice and their complete disregard for everyone else. The tragedy of this lonely little girl wanting people to die because that means she gets new friends to play with, and just what twisted results can come from a demon being moved by human emotions without being limited by human notions of right and wrong. It goes to show that Shin Megami Tensei was evolving not just on a technical level but artistically as well. With the barrier down, we now had access to a previously closed off area to the north of Roppongi. It led to a crossroads. Aminari's spirit appears again to ask us to investigate a police station to the north and stop a bunch of the robots who had suddenly gone haywire. High Friend also shows up to warn us against visiting Ikebukuro to the west for our own good, as he says. And we find Steven tucked into a small room, looking exactly the same as 30 years ago, ready to provide a convenient little upgrade that allows us to summon 4 demons at a time instead of just 3. In other words, that was a clear sign that we wouldn't be getting our companions back. Visibility inside the police station was terrible, but these fog areas are a lot easier to deal with in Shin Megami Tensei, since the Automap keeps track of your exact position even inside the fog. Getting to the robot control room was easy enough, and there we meet your standard Doc Brown-looking mad scientist, who was in the process of restoring the police station's robots in the hopes of using them to heal everyone. Now, the thing about robots is that they are very weak to lightning attacks, and the thing about Belle is that she's very good at using lightning spells. It was honestly really funny how easily we defeated his robot army. We salvaged a memory board from the control system and leave the Mad Doctor to mourn his broken robots. The third route led into Ginza, which is even more massive than it used to be in Megami Tensei 2. Size is about all it has going for it though, and other than a few NPCs mentioning the Messian's plans to build a cathedral to summon God, Steven plugging in our new memory board into our computer, and some punk demon user trying to extort me. You know, nothing plot critical. I mean, the old man from Ichijoji seems to be doing well, hanging out by himself in the deepest recesses of the Ginza basement, but all he's got for us now is a vague promise of helping guide us if we ever felt lost. As if we weren't already. It was also around that time I started feeling like the battles were dragging on a bit too long. You know, that late game feeling where suddenly you are running into a random encounter every 2 or 3 steps, and every encounter runs for a full 3 or 4 waves. Yeah, despite all improvements present in Shin Megami Tensei, the late game grind is just as bad as Megami Tensei 2, and Ginza gives us an early taste of that. Thankfully, the manual tells us about a spell called the Stoma that cuts down on enemy encounters. Demons capable of using it are really rare though. I personally only found it on Ortros. What the manual doesn't tell you is the fact that there's an item, helpfully named the Demon Sealing Bell, that does the exact same thing. The next place we visited was Tokyo Tower, Bell's home in the past game, and Discover the Messiah Church had converted it into a fully functional TV studio, broadcasting their sermons all over the Tokyo wasteland. The place doesn't seem to hold any story events, but it was fun to have them fawn over me a bit due to being their ally. A few of their members also joined us for free, and I decided it was time to do some more human experimentation. You see, even though in the story only the Eos hero is crazy enough to willingly fuse himself with a demon, and the Law side abhors the idea of humans and demons living together, our Messian allies are perfectly content to step into the goo vat in order to become demons themselves. Except in their case, fusions follow a completely different and, as far as I can tell, arbitrary set of rules. Literally, they even mark these fusions with a question mark. You kinda have to try and error your way through them, but if you try long enough, you can get some interesting results. Beating the punk over in Ginza opens the way to Shinagawa, another mission stronghold. This place is home to a familiar demon from way back in the first game, the Roa. You know, those bastards that kept draining my levels back in Mazurka. The level drain mechanic is gone, as far as I can tell, but Roas now have instant death spells, and more importantly, Sama rearmed the resurrection spell, which has been slightly nerfed. In Megami Tensei 2, it used to resurrect your allies with full HP and MP. This of course was easily exploitable as a way to get infinite MP and therefore infinite healing, so for understandable reasons, Shin Megami Tensei Sama Rearm does not restore MP anymore. Still, getting a resurrection spell and a get out of battle free card against demons who instantly heal 2 party members per turn is just too good a deal to pass up. Shinagawa is one of those maze-like dungeons with lots of hole traps that you fall through and then spend way too long making your way back to where you were, but it has a bunch of plot significance. We hear about a mystical golden apple that can restore sanity to demons, presently being guarded by the Eos aligned demons in Ueno, but more importantly, we discover Aminari had been resurrected by God and became the new messiah of the Messiah Church. That whole being crucified in a very Jesus-like fashion thing from the start was a lot more literal than I first thought. Aminari was now fully aware and on board with God's plan of establishing his 1000-year kingdom and achieving eternal peace. He asks us to put a stop to the demon Idna's plans of destroying the Cathedral by, as usual, healing her. This marks the second big decision point in the game. Once again, you can choose which side to support by helping one of the leaders heal the other, or prove that you've got a heart full of neutrality by healing both instead. Also from this point on, If your alignment has shifted too far to one side, your actor will make those decisions for you, which, again, is kind of a bold move. I like that it acts as a direct consequence of how you've been acting throughout the game up to this point, but it can easily be seen as unfair considering how little feedback the game gives you regarding what actions are seen as lawful or chaotic. There was one last floor to explore though, and there I found another demon user who gave me the 4 doors gen, which, as you would expect, I would need in the future. The only information I had on Edna is that she lived somewhere to the east, so I took that as an opportunity to tie up loose ends, explore the map, and power up a bit. Scattered throughout the Tokyo wasteland, we kept finding small house-shaped dungeons filled with really powerful demons, and now it turns out we were ready to clear them. Each dungeon houses a statue of one of the 4 heavenly kings, but this deity is meant to watch over each of the 4 cardinal directions and, depending on your alignment, may either attack or join you. They are powerful but fight you entirely on their own, making for easy stun-lock targets worth a decent bit of experience. I also finally decided to disregard Haifran's warning and visit Ikebukuro. As soon as we leave the tunnel, he finds us and scolds me for not listening. He then arrests me for being a demon user and brings us to Ingiyama, who sits in Ikebukuro judging those accused of crimes against demons. In my case, using demons without entering a pact with them. That sounded wrong though. I mean, not only were my demons all properly bribed into service, but they also received sizable marker omissions every time they were summoned, and a steady supply of magnetite while present in my party. Before I would state my case though, something weird happened. Yama declared that, since we were using these demons for the sake of furthering the Eos faction's goals, we weren't guilty of any crimes. Wait a minute, I was pretty sure by then I had been aligning myself with the Law faction, first by accident, then cowardice, and lately for the sweet irony of turning religious fanatics into demons. Well, alright, maybe that last part wasn't very lawful of me, but even now, having read the wiki page of how alignment works in the first Shin Megami Tensei and reviewing my footage, I have no idea how that happened. I mean, look how hard my little indicator was spinning just before I arrived in Ikebukuro. The only possible explanation I can think of is that maybe I ran into a memory overflow bug, you know, where a number stored in memory gets so high the transistors can't physically store it, so they reset back to 0 and start counting again. Look up the nuclear Gandhi bug if you want a more detailed explanation. Anyway, since Yama likes us, we would actually just walk out of town anytime we wanted. Right after spending a couple of hours obsessively scouring Ikebukuro for shops and treasure, of course. The Ikebukuro surroundings had another of these mansions, which we handily cleared for a strangely massive amount of experience, 4 levels worth, and a tunnel leading into Ueno, our next destination. Ueno, as the Gaia Ultimate Seat of Power, had a bunch of interesting interactions. A very sharply dressed man introduces himself as Rui Cypher, which, come on, Rui Cypher? They're not even trying to hide it, are they? He says he's being accompanied by someone who's eager to meet us, and it turns out to be our beloved stalker Yuriko. She's still disappointed about me having been made to choose Belle instead of her, which really works even in a meta-narrative sense because, you know, that really wasn't my choice to make. Anyway, she declares that if she can't have me, nobody can, then reveals her true form as Lilith, making things even more awkward as we spent a decent amount of time healing Lilin, you know, her literal daughters, not too long ago. But then she has a change of heart and leaves, saying that she can't do it after all. This seems to amuse Rui Cypher a great deal, and he also leaves. Also, a bunch of NPCs keep talking about the Tokyo Destiny Land, some sort of magical island where your destiny can be changed but currently inaccessible because a dog demon decided to block the only bridge leading to it. Up top, the Gaia Ult's founder offers to baptize us in their faith, which I declined for the moment since I figured that would lock me into their faction. Our real objective here was the Golden Apple, guarded by the dragon Radon. After healing him and taking the apple, the next obvious destination was the Tokyo Destiny Land to the south, but there was a river in the way. While looking for a path, I found another of these houses and figured why not. went inside expecting to fight another of the heavenly inks, but since the game had decided I was a very chaotic person, he joined me instead. Turns out that house links into another house to the south, and that's our way into Tokyo Destiny Land and the Cerberus guarding it. The apple rose breaks whatever spell was causing him to go berserk, and he thanks us for our help. Apparently, if I had turned Pascal into a Cerberus, that would be him right here. He would then recognize me and rejoin my party, but I didn't, so he just left instead. Inside the TDL, we run into our ninja friend and see Leaf wasted no time dating the other thing we have to a male best friend. Haifran introduces her as Rie, looking just so happy to have finally found a partner of his own. I felt kinda bad for the guy. Anyway, he's decided to join the fight against God's conspiracy, as he puts it, and recommends we have a meeting with the goddess who rules this land, Eidna. When they leave, Belle says that she has a bad feeling about the new girl. And yeah, I know the intention here was to keep it a secret to be revealed later, but Yuriko acting stalkerish for the entire game, revealing herself as Lilith, then storming off after a fit of jealousy, only for Mr. Selfish low self-esteem here to suddenly find himself a suspiciously quiet, attractive girlfriend. Well, I'd be more surprised if she wasn't Lilith. Also, speaking of surprises, just look who I found in the TDL. This Manticore design reminds me a lot of the red-haired elf from Metaphor Refantasio. It's most likely just a result of being made by a studio with such a strong visual style, but the resemblance is obvious. This dungeon has a few new gameplay elements worth noting. First, a bunch of trap floors that are supposed to test your luck by literally rolling against your luck stat. If the roll fails, you are afflicted with a status effect, including being turned into a fly. If it succeeds, congratulations, nothing happens. To help with that, the dungeon is absolutely littered with luck incenses, so if you went lucky before, a thorough exploration of this dungeon will ensure to be also. Second, there's a minigame of sorts to change your fate, which in mechanical terms means changing your alignment. You choose one of 4 doors, 2 of them shift your alignment towards Law and 2 towards Chaos. You only use each door once, but they are not random, so it's easy enough to safe stun your way towards your preferred alignment if you wish. Also, most likely your last chance to do so before the endgame starts. Lastly, TDL has some special anti-gravity floors that send you up rather than down, along with the usual trap holes, and making your way up to meet Eidna requires you to essentially navigate a 3D puzzle of going up and down and up and down and up and down until you start regretting not drawing your own maps instead of relying on an automap that only shows you the floor you're standing on. Still, it is a rather creative dungeon since it turns out Eidna is actually massive and hides inside Tokyo Destiny Land and like a worm hiding inside an apple. Since I had taken the opportunity to change my destiny back to lawful, Eidna decides it would be a waste of time to try talking me into joining her and immediately attacks, which is kind of a silly idea if you think about it, considering she's stuck inside the asshole while we're free to lightning bolt her in the face over and over again. Reporting back to Aminari is easy enough, and he asks the angel Haniel to tell him the good news. Haniel then asks us to make haste towards the Cathedral so we could keep helping God's 1000-year kingdom come to fruition. But first, by re-entering Aminari's sanctum, we get to meet the founder of the Messiah Church, who baptizes us. For funsies, I then went back to Ueno just to see if the recent events unlocked any interesting interactions with the founder of the Gaia cult, but sadly he just threw us out. From the moment you step into the Cathedral, the developers make it clear that's the final area of the game. It has an entirely new tile set, background music that goes hard, and all the facilities you could ever need, all conveniently arranged near the entrance. The place is filled with machines, anxiously waiting to witness God's arrival, plus one crazy lady holding an octopus demon prisoner to sacrifice as an offering later. If you talk to him, he begs you for help, claiming to not have done anything. In my usual fashion, I decide to put off my decision until a later date, when hopefully I have a better idea of how that decision actually affects me. Still, as Aminari reveals, there's plenty of work left to be done. Despite Aiden's death, the Gaia Ult had succeeded in taking the northern area of the Cathedral, and the whole place was now filled with demons. Just as he tells us this, God strikes back in all his holy fury, sending a dreadful flood that covers all but the tallest areas of Tokyo. It seems I accidentally omitted a sequence break here. Aminari was supposed to tell me to go hunt the 4 heavenly inks, but I had done that already, so we skipped straight to the next part. Stuck in the Cathedral and with very few things to interact with, I went back and saved the demonic octopus. The Messian lady objects, but then understands that sacrificing defenseless demons in God's name isn't really all that lawful and agrees to stop. As a gesture of thanks, the octopus agrees not to eat us and even gives me a whistle to summon him whenever I want, conveniently allowing us to navigate flooded areas just when we need it most. Our first stop was the northern entrance of the Cathedral, where the Gaia Ult set up their stronghold. It's full of ultis as expected, but also random civilians relieved to have been saved from drowning. That, of course, only made the Gaians angrier at God's highly selective concept of salvation. They didn't seem to mind the fact that I had sided with their enemy though, and allowed me to use their facilities just the same, which was nice since some of their shops had some slightly different items on sale. Getting back to Aminari, he had a new snag for us to deal with. The Hindu god Vishnu was currently locked in a stalemate against the demon Ravana somewhere over Shinjuku and needed our help. The site of the battle between Vishnu and Ravana happened to be on top of the Tokyo government building. We made our landing on the 32nd floor, conveniently right beside the terminal, and find 2 sets of stairs up. I should note that this was around the time when I got fed up with all the constant random encounters and endless waves of easily defeated demons, and figuring there wasn't much left to do in the game, started using my demon stealing bells, and I have to say, it just made the gameplay feel so much better. One set of stairs led to Vishnu, who immediately joined our party so we could fight Ravana together, and the other led to Ravana, who got stun-locked to death like everyone else. Then, in a surprising turn of events, his son Indrajit suddenly shows up to avenge his freshly deceased father, only to get stun-locked just like him. With another assassination aired out in the name of God, we return to the Cathedral and find out Aminari has gone further inside. He tells us that our former friend Hyphren had aided the demon Azura in taking over the entire Cathedral basement. Turns out the Cathedral is a full 16-floor mega dungeon, as wide as it is tall, full of story events, secrets, and yes, an average population of about 16 demons by square. That's how you can tell you're in the final stretches of an old JRPG after all, when crossing a single order takes half an hour because you've had to fight through the entire population of the Vatican on the way. This stretch reminds me a bit of the final moments of Megami Tensei 2 actually. The story events thin out, and you're expected to just move through each floor, killing a bunch of one-dimensional boss enemies, but after defeating Cert, I had an idea. What if I went up instead? Well, turns out if you go off the beaten path, which in my case meant going up the Cathedral rather than down, you actually get the bosses from your faction to join your party for free. Also, you actually find a secret area filled with powerful WoW exclusive items. When we reached the top, Aminari was there to tell us our angelic cohort would be short-lived. To reach Azura, I'd have to fuse the 3 archangels who had just joined me into an angelic ring, and for that we'd have to find a special heretics manner capable of fusing demons into items. Well, good thing I decided not to blindly obey the game. It would be highly frustrating to go all the way down to the 8th basement, only to find the door shut because I didn't have the special door opening MacGuffin no one told me I was supposed to bring. But I didn't want to part ways with my overpowered party member so soon either, so instead I decided to go down there anyway. Look, I figured that would at least make the boss fights easier. And so it came to pass that Uriel, Gabriel and Raphael combined their forces with the 2 humans and Vishnu who stuck around to defeat Hell's generals one by one. After Cert came Astaroth, and he's still just as marvelous, taking his massive green snake for a basement joyride, laughing all the way. Too bad his role was downgraded to that of a mere boss fight though. His surprise appearance in Megami Tensei 2 was much better. He was more of a challenge though, because he turned out to be faster than Bell at using the exact same lightning stun lock strategy as me. All the strategy in the world was useless against a mob of edgier angels though, so he ended up like all the others. Then we aim upon Ariok. The thing about Ariok is that he's got a massive layer of fat that insulates him against most types of damage, but he's not immune to being stun locked, so the fight turned into a haze of death by 1,000 lightning bolts. After Ariok, we meet Lucifer, who helpfully informs us that in an island to the west, we would find something good that would aid us in defeating Azura. That was actually kind of an interesting dilemma. On the one hand, he was clearly an enemy, so it would make sense if that was a false tip-off to lead us into a trap, but on the other, everyone knows one of Lucifer's defining traits is that he's cunning and treacherous, so it would just as easily be that he wanted to use us for his own goals. Either way, leaving the dungeon meant having to redo the track all over again, so I put it off until I had reached as far as I could. And in the 7th basement, we find High Friend standing on top of Aminari's orbs, reflecting how justice is nothing without power to back it up, and how he used to be in the same position. He attacks us, we win, Lilith gets angry at me for killing a friend in Old Blood, as if he hadn't literally just done the same, and we finally get to fight her. She was immune to my usual strategy, but turned out to have very little HP, so leaving Bell in a support role while letting everyone else stab her to death worked just fine. And that was the end of the line. Azura was just beyond that door, but I didn't have the ring with me, so it was time to warp back to the surface, check out Mr. Cypher's island, and go talk to a guy about a ring. The island was home to Beelzebub, who appeared before us in his best Aveman cosplay. A bit of a downgrade compared to his previous design, but hey, they can't all be winners. Since we were well aligned and he is not, we were morally obligated to fight to the death and win one soma for our turbos. A bit of a waste of time to be honest, but at least I didn't have to go through an entire dungeon for that. By the way, if your A is aligned, it seems he'll join you for free and is actually the strongest party member in the whole game. Finding the place to fuse my ring took a bit of wandering around, as the game hadn't provided any hints, but we eventually reached a tall building in Ikebukuro that had a pretty annoying fog maze and found an old man inside who would do it. As soon as I cleared up space on my inventory, that is, those damn memory limitations strike again. We then wave goodbye to 3 of the most powerful allies we ever had and get a massive ring that looks more like a halo. Returning to the Cathedral, I took a little break to replenish my party. The Heretics Manor menu had a new option for me, Sword Fusion. I don't know if that was a direct consequence of fusing the ring, but now I could fuse demons to some of my swords. I didn't actually go through with it though, as I was literally in the last few stages of the game and didn't feel the need to marginally improve my equipment. Kind of a cool idea though, too bad it was introduced so late. With the angelic ring in hand, we were now free to face Azura, and doing so reminded me of just how much of a different experience it is getting around dungeons in this game when you know exactly where you have to go and have a demon sealing bell active. Seriously, it took only 11 minutes to get back to where I was, and it would be even faster if the Automap menu was more conveniently accessible. Just like Lilith, Azura makes a slight comment about me trampling over the orbs of a friend to get to him, because of course, it's only fine when they do it, and then he attacks us. Turns out he was faster than any of us despite Bell having 30 speed, had some really nasty group damage spells, and would heal himself, forcing us into a battle of attrition. Upon his defeat, a voice calls out from the heavens, telling us to go to them. We are mercifully teleported all the way up to the 8th floor, 16 floors up, where we get to once again meet the Messenger of God. He tells us that Aminari has safely arrived back at God's side, and it was now our job to save the few remaining survivors, guiding them to a future of unending peace and joy in God's 1000-year kingdom. We're treated to the traditional credits sequence, revisiting some A moments and characters, but get to see one last scene. Bell, standing in one of the Cathedral's many corridors, laments the countless lives lost in the course of that senseless conflict, but leaves us with the hope that they will all be reborn just like she was. And that brings another Megami Tensei game to a close. It really was, as I expected, Megami Tensei 2.5 in pretty much every way, both the good and the bad. Atlus reused a huge chunk of the second game, expanding upon their original ideas and fixing a bunch of the issues I, and no doubt a lot of their players at the time, had with them. They did a wonderful job transitioning their unique visual and musical style to the 16-bit era of course, but to me, the biggest improvement by far came from their increased attention to dialogue and cutscene writing, bringing the Tokyo Wasteland characters to life in a way the previous games didn't and allowing them to deepen their experiment with branching narratives. The first iteration of the alignment system does have a few issues though. I already pointed out the lack of feedback given to the player and how that can make you feel unfairly punished by an opaque system that silently judges your every action, but my biggest issue really is the way it feels at odds with the way exploration and random encounters work. The main backdrop of the story is that there is a religious war going on, and most of the people and demons you meet have joined either one side or the other, but very little of that extreme factionalism is reflected in the gameplay. You can get some, in the way fanatics will often agree to join you for free if you're allied to their faction, but as I advanced in my playthrough and started etching on to the workings of the alignment system, it felt increasingly weird as a lawful character to be constantly attacked by lawful demons and having to go through the entire conversation minigame for a chance to have them live peacefully. The world would feel a lot more alive if random encounters sometimes started the conversation on their own rather than having me do it all the time. Plus, some gameplay mechanics behind gaining alignment points feel at odds with the way the factions present themselves. For example, defeating demons of the same species as those in your party makes you more chaotic, and talking to them makes you more lawful even though, ostensibly, Chaos representatives preach coexistence while members of the Law faction are more than willing to destroy one of the biggest cities in the world for the sake of stopping a demon invasion. Of course, some of that may be intentional to represent the usual disconnect between pure ideology and the people who preach it, but when trying to interpret developer intent, it's way too easy to just project your own biases instead. Most likely they just couldn't figure out how to make a better system under the constraints of the time. Add to that the insistence in turning late-game dungeons into a frankly exhausting gauntlet of random encounters against easy but numerous enemies, and the lack of significant improvements to a battle system that was never great in the first place, and the endgame's log became a major source of frustration. For the third time in a Megami Tensei game, I found myself rushing through the last few sections, not because I was looking forward to the ending, but rather because I just wanted it to end. Nevertheless, as harsh as I may have sounded just now, Shin Megami Tensei easily takes the top spot out of the 3 games I've played thus far. It combines the gameplay depth of Megami Tensei 2 with the snappy, responsive controls of the first. It added an interesting plot to follow along, deeper character interactions, more granular changes to the world that reflected the consequences of your actions, and a morality system that feels refreshing even today, as it is deeply rooted in your playstyle, not just a few dialogue-based choices. If Megami Tensei 2 represented a bold stumble forward for the series, Shin Megami Tensei represents Atlus finally finding their footing, starting the over 30-year run that they've successfully effed up all this time and hopefully for many years to come. I'm excited to see what Shin Megami Tensei 2 as a direct sequel brings to the series. But before we get there, there's another Megami Tensei developed internally by Atlus that I'm excited to try. You see, my greatest issue with the Megami Tensei series at this point hangs entirely in the combat system and random encounter design. Majin Tensei, released just 2 months before Shin Megami Tensei 2, promised to change exactly that by applying the Megami Tensei formula to a strategy RPG, and I'm curious to see the results of this genre shift. That one might take a while though. For some reason, everyone and their mothers decided to jam their releases into the months of August and September, and there's a few I'm interested in playing as soon as I can. Until then, if you've made it this far, I'm grateful for your attention, hope you enjoyed the video, and welcome any feedback you may have. Bye bye!